Welcome into the Sports Objective Podcast. We appreciate everyone tuning in on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, however you join us this afternoon. Tremendous Week 6 in college football. And right now, before we welcome in our first guest, very excited to welcome back to the program. We were just talking, about 12 hours ago, Matt? It was a late night on the Pirate football playback as East Carolina suffered a heartbreaking defeat down at UCF. But how are things going on this beautiful Sunday?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm still recovering from that loss last night to UCF. That one's going to sting for a while because it's another one that got away, and we've seen that happen now on two occasions this year where it was a game that we basically had in our grasp and unfortunately just weren't able to finish for various reasons. But trying to bounce back from this one, and happy to be here with you guys and looking forward to catching up with Chris here.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned Chris, and Chris Vannini of The Athletic has joined us on numerous occasions previously. And I'm very excited to have you back on the show, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. It was a crazy day of college football from top to bottom. One of the wildest days I think we've ever seen in the sport, from the number of upsets to the finishes to the surprising names to come out of the day as the heroes. Just an absolutely crazy day.
And we know you were, very blessed to be there at the Cotton Bowl. Certainly, for any college football fan, whether you're an Oklahoma or Texas fan or not, and just a college football fan in general, is on my bucket list things or games rather that I would love to attend in venues. That's one of the great things that this rivalry continues to be played there at the historic Cotton Bowl instead of being moved to Jerry's World, and that's something that hopefully will continue.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know, they play it at the State Fair of Texas, which goes on for a month on the east side of Dallas. So you've got fried food galore, Ferris wheels, livestock auctions, just so much stuff going right around the stadium. The Cotton Bowl Stadium is on the fairgrounds. So last year's game was also only 25% capacity. The fair didn't really happen because of COVID. So this was the first time really in 2 years that we got a full experience for this game. And yeah, you're right. I am, for any college football fan, I think put that game on your bucket list for sure.
Chris, how many fans were in attendance yesterday?
I think it's like 92,000. I think I recall something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely low to mid 90s. So, and you may be right, Chris. I didn't confirm it in a box score or anything. I want to say the television commentators mentioned 95 or 96, but whatever. It was just a tremendous crowd, and what a game they saw. Let's dive into that a little bit. Lincoln Riley and the Sooners fell behind 14-0 right out of the gates, and what was first play from scrimmage, right? Went for a touchdown, and then you had a special teams miscue set up another score, and then all of a sudden it's 28-7 after a quarter.
Yeah, it was 14-0 after 2 minutes. And
right.
The 28 points, that's the most Oklahoma's ever given up in the first quarter of a game. So, and the largest comeback in their largest comeback in the history of rivalry was 11 points. So things were not in a good spot, and they were still down 38. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they'd given up 38 points or something like that at 35 around halftime.
Yeah, I think it was 38-20 or 38-21 at halftime.
Yeah, something like that. So it was, it looked rough for Oklahoma. They were not moving the ball the way we're used to seeing. Texas was moving it with ease behind Casey Thompson, and this was kind of the Sarkisian offense we all expected. Bijan Robinson, one of the best players in the country, was running over Oklahoma in that first half. And things didn't look good for the Sooners, and Texas suddenly looked like the best team in the Big 12 going into halftime. But then second half comes out. Oklahoma only gives up 10 points in the second half. Big comeback. Caleb Williams takes over. The backup quarterback replaces Spencer Rattler, who we thought could be the number one pick coming into the year. And Caleb Williams looked great running the ball, throwing the ball, and Oklahoma makes this furious charge back, takes the lead in the fourth quarter. Texas ties it. Oklahoma drives down and scores a winning touchdown with 3 seconds left. Absolutely crazy game. You can't come up with enough words to describe what that experience was like there.
Chris, what was the mood of the Texas faithful after the game? Because as we all know, that is a demanding environment. We've seen several coaching changes at Texas over the last 15 years. Obviously, new coach Sarkisian taking over there this year, but that's always anytime you lose that game, patience can wear quickly. So, what was the mood that you were able to pick up on from the Texas fans?
I mean, they were distraught because they thought they had the game won. And instead it turned out the way a lot of Texas Oklahoma games have turned out for them over the last handful of years, which was heartbreaking fashion. Last year they lose the game in 4 overtimes. So it was a sign that Sark hasn't arrived yet fully, because we saw a lot of from Texas yesterday that we've seen from Texas before. So now it's, how are they going to respond? What's Texas going to look like moving forward? How are things going to be different under Steve Sarkisian? That's kind of the question coming up, because, to give that game away was a really tough pill to swallow.
And before, I know here in just a moment we'll talk about what Texas does have coming up, but looking at the second half of that game, you talked about 38-21 at halftime, and then still late in the third quarter, it was still an 18-point margin for Texas, 41-23, and Oklahoma. Kennedy Brooks broke a long run. It looked as though Texas may have been taken over. What about their own 15 or 20-yard line with an 18-point lead with, a minute and a half, 2 minutes left in the third quarter? Instead, Oklahoma retains possession. They drop the snap, pick it up, throw a touchdown, and then the comeback continued.
Yeah, I mean, on that play, too, Caleb Williams fumbles the snap, then runs around to his right and finds a guy in the back of the end zone. And I don't know if you could tell on TV, but the hole that he fit that pass through was not big. I mean, there were not players around him, but there were players in front of him, in front of the receiver. And he didn't float it over. Caleb Williams didn't float it over those defenders. He threw it through them. He has such an incredible zip on his ball. Like, we knew he could run. That was what everybody knew about him. And we saw it. He had a 66-yard touchdown run in that game. But the zip he has on his throws was really impressive. And that and his running ability was a huge part in Oklahoma making the comeback, because he could extend plays. He could run the ball. They use him as a decoy. They do direct snaps to Kennedy Brooks, who would fake a toss to Williams and then run himself, which is what the game-winning play was in the fourth quarter. So Caleb Williams just brings a completely different dynamic to this team. And he's got to be the starter moving forward here. You have to start him next week instead of Spencer Rattler. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Lincoln Riley handles all of that.
Sure will. And I'll tell you, I was impressed by his pocket presence. There were a few times in the red zone where Texas was bringing pressure off the edge, and he was able to have the presence of mind to sidestep the pressure and deliver a throw, because there were on 2 occasions he was dead to rights. There was a blitzer that was not picked up, and he was able to show the athletic ability to be able to sidestep that and throw a dart, really. So I'll tell you, it's going to be an interesting situation for Lincoln Riley this week. And anytime you have a quarterback like Spencer Rattler that's so heralded coming into the season, now all of a sudden you have this quarterback, I guess you would call it controversy, halfway through. How do you anticipate that playing out this week?
Well, I don't see how you go back to Rattler to start the game. I mean, Lincoln Riley did put Rattler in for the 2-point conversion, for a 2-point conversion that was successful, and Lincoln Riley pointed that out after the game. But the Oklahoma team just was different when Caleb Williams was out there. There was just more energy. Everybody could kind of sense it. I mean, 2 weeks ago, you had Oklahoma fans chanting, "We want Caleb." It hasn't quite clicked yet this season for Spencer Rattler for whatever reason. And there's just a different energy when he's out there, and we'll see how he's going to explain it. He might say, we haven't made any decisions. We'll find out, but I don't know how you go back to Rattler after a performance like that by Caleb Williams, who won you that game. That's not to say Caleb Williams will play great every year. Maybe he'll struggle and Spencer Rattler will have to come back in if he doesn't decide to transfer immediately. But that's going to be something he's going to have to balance, because you don't want Spencer Rattler to just leave all of a sudden. Not now, maybe by the end of the year, he tries to figure out what else is better, but you got to keep him in the loop, in the picture for this season still, because there's still a lot of ways to go.
Well, that game certainly was one of the best of the day, if not the best of the day. There were many other tremendous games, and we'll get to those here in just a moment. But right now, Kyle, I know you're just joining us, so did you have any thoughts on that Oklahoma-Texas game before we move on?
I got to watch the first half of it. Texas was dominant. Being here at the East Carolina area, we all know Lincoln Riley, and I was talking to my dad during the game. I said, Oklahoma's going to come back in this game. As Texas was dominating, and I said, I don't know if they'll win it, but they're going to come back. It's not over, and so it didn't surprise me that Lincoln, pulled a quarterback off the bench or did whatever he had to do to come back and make that a ball game, and then to win it the way they did was an exciting finish. I was listening to the second half on satellite radio, but it didn't surprise me. It surprised me that Spencer Rattler struggled so much and they had to go to the bench, but in a way it didn't, because it just seems like that's something Lincoln Riley would do. He'd have another quarterback sitting there ready to go that's going to come back and beat Texas.
Well, he pulled Spencer Rattler last year too for a couple drives late in the first half, put in Tanner Mordecai before going back to Rattler. So it's actually 2 years in a row really that he's actually pulled Rattler from this game. The difference is this time, obviously, he didn't go back in.
Talking about what each of these teams have coming up next, Texas has another team from the state of Oklahoma, the Cowboys, coming to town, and Mike Gundy's crew's undefeated.
Yeah, and this is a different Oklahoma State team if you haven't been paying attention to them. They are really good on defense. They have held like 14 of their last 16 teams to below their season average in scoring. They went to Boise State and won. So I'm very curious to see how this Texas offense, which is very good, how it's going to play against that Oklahoma State defense. It's similar to Oklahoma State's offense has not been all that good, but Texas' defense has been a bit of a mess all year. So it's an interesting matchup between units that are not really on the same level going up against each other.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm very intrigued to see how Texas will respond because, like you mentioned earlier, Texas had a close call against Oklahoma last year, to say the least, 3 or 4 overtimes, as you mentioned. But, and they couldn't find a way to win those close ball games, and the big games like Oklahoma and certain ones under Tom Herman. We'll see how things go under just year one of Steve Sarkisian. But Oklahoma, they return home now, and who is it they have coming up? TCU.
Yeah, TCU's been a weird team this year. The defense has been not good. They've really struggled to stop the run. They did bounce back with a win against Texas Tech last week or this week, but they lost to Texas and SMU before that. So, Oklahoma looks like the best team in the Big 12. They're back in the playoff hunt now that everybody else is losing. So there's a lot more to play for, but it's possible that Oklahoma found itself on offense in this game because they have not been the same this year. They have not had explosive plays. They're not throwing long on first downs like they used to. And Lincoln Riley says it's a lot of too high looks on defense that's causing them to do that. But if that happens, you got to figure out other ways to move the ball. And perhaps Caleb Williams' running ability is that new dynamic that they take moving forward and how that fits in with the rest of their run game.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there was a lot of talk around the country heading into yesterday that Oklahoma was overrated because their offense has been a little stagnant at times this year, and they haven't been necessarily winning in the same type of fashion they have in years past. So I think yesterday that could be the spark that Lincoln Riley's looking for. He, as always, he did a tremendous job adjusting to what Texas was presenting, and that's why he's Lincoln Riley, because he has the unique ability in college football to find ways to move the ball and score points. And he is one of the best at it. But that certainly could be the spark that Oklahoma needs moving forward because, like I said, there was a lot of talk of them being way overrated. Yeah,
they haven't looked good. I mean, they barely beat Tulane. They barely beat Nebraska. But the last 2 games, 2 completely different games at Kansas State and then Texas, they've looked more comfortable, at least in spurts. Defensively, the second half against Texas, offensively from time to time. So, yeah, I mean they're number 3, number 4 on the polls now, ahead of teams like Alabama now, and maybe they shouldn't be. How good are they really? We don't really know. But if they keep winning, in the end, that's really all that matters. And maybe they have a rematch with Texas in the Big 12 championship game. It's going to be a rematch no matter who they play in the Big 12 championship. And they still don't look like the world beaters. If they matched up again, obviously Texas would have a good chance to win. So there's still a long road ahead for them. But finding something with Caleb Williams is certainly a big step in the right direction.
Here in about 15 minutes, we'll be joined by former Florida Gator wide receiver standout, and that is Chris Doering of the SEC Network. So stay tuned for that. But Chris, we know one of the things that you've really honed in on over the years. Yes, you're a national college football writer, but the Group of Five, as they're called, several Group of Five teams still unbeaten, the likes of Coastal Carolina. I know you did an article on Jamie Chadwell's ball club here recently, and then you have Brady Hoke undefeated with the Aztecs out there at San Diego State. So what are some of the other top stories around the country that you've really been impressed by thus far through the first half of the season?
Yeah, it's a lot of impressive teams, and maybe not the ones we expected. I mean, Cincinnati we expected. But halfway through the season, they're now number 3 in the country. I don't think we saw that coming. So they're obviously in a good spot. Coastal Carolina has been bulldozing everybody that they play. I don't know if they're going to have a loss on the schedule, but it may not be enough to get to where they want. SMU is undefeated, 6-0. They had to kind of escape Navy after they've had a couple of games. They kind of had to pull one out to get a win. They had a Hail Mary against Louisiana Tech. But they are obviously the biggest threat to Cincinnati in the American. San Diego State, 5-0. Brady Hoke's team has a couple wins over Pac-12 teams in a Mountain West that is pretty good with Nevada up there. Boise State's still there. There's a lot to like in the Mountain West. And then elsewhere, that's probably about it for now. The American has been down. Memphis just lost to Tulsa. They've lost 3 in a row. 3 very weird games.
Yeah.
UCF obviously bounced back with the win, but they've been off since Dylan Gabriel was gone. So it's not the usual suspects that are at the top of the Group of Five, and that makes for an interesting second half of the year.
And not that I necessarily, by any means, expect these the 2 teams I'm about to mention programs to push for a New Year's Six bid, but tremendous starts. What a job on that staff at UTSA is doing. They're unbeaten, have some nice wins, and one of those was in fact over Memphis. I think it was the first of the 3 games in this current 3-game skid for the Tigers. And then you also have Sonny Dykes down at SMU. They battled back from 14 down yesterday to win at Navy.
Yeah, Jeff Traylor has done a tremendous job there at UTSA. They go 7-5 last year. They played BYU within 7 points, I think. And now they're 6-0 this year. So they have been a great story. UTEP is 5-1 in Conference USA. Now they haven't beaten anyone all that good, but this is a team that struggled to beat anybody from FBS just a couple of years ago. So Conference USA, UTEP more quietly, UTSA not so quietly. UTSA is kind of banging on the door to get into the top 25. I think they're the only undefeated team not ranked in the top 25 right now. But we've seen them win shootouts with Memphis in Western Kentucky yesterday. So this is a team that can win a lot of different ways. And there's a number of Group of Five teams that are ahead of them in terms of getting to that New Year's Six spot. But you keep winning, who knows what's going to happen? And UTSA look pretty good.
Yeah, and UTSA, have a great season, win Conference USA. There's more goals than just getting the New Year's Six spot. I think people get hung up on the playoff or the New Year's Six spot rather than just talking about a good team trying to win their conference. Like, one team that interests me is Northern Illinois. They, made a coaching change a couple of years ago when their coach left to go to Temple, and had struggled in the last couple of years, and now this year, 3-2, nice win over Georgia Tech, and then yesterday a nice come from behind win over Toledo. They surprised me this year so far. I did not expect much out of NIU.
Yeah, Thomas Hammock, the coach, he was adamant that the last couple of years they've really been leaning on young guys, and that it was going to come, and that he was going to be given the time to see it through. And even now, you look at their 2 deep, it's still full of redshirt freshmen and sophomores, guys who got an extra year from last year and stuff like that. But yeah, they beat Georgia Tech. They beat Toledo. They go to Wyoming and almost win there. They've got some close wins. They've got some close losses. Things could bounce one way or another. But in a MAC that is wide open every year, NIU is going to be in that mix there. And they clearly are a team that is making a bit of progress.
Northern Illinois reminds me very much of East Carolina in the American right now.
How's that?
Year 3, coaches building programs, similar records, playing a lot of close ball games. Both teams are winning or losing very close games. I think the programs are in very similar spots.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Bowden used to always say, you take over a bad team and you lose big, then you lose close, then you win close, then you win big. And both of those teams are probably in that win close, lose close middle ground right now, where, maybe next year, where is it going? Rest of this year, or maybe next year, which one of those ways is going to go the other way? So yeah, I can see that.
Going back to the Sun Belt, Chris, you talk about Coastal Carolina. Is anybody going to challenge them? And this is an interesting conversation I was having yesterday with just a neutral observer, and you just found it odd that Coastal Carolina had a tremendous year a season ago, and then they're preseason top 25, but then you have App State, who had at one point won at least 3, maybe 4 consecutive Sun Belt titles, and have done some of the things that they've done, and they just doesn't seem like they get as much respect as they probably deserve, like a Coastal Carolina did.
Yeah, I mean, App is the last chance for anybody to be Coastal in the regular season. They play pretty soon here, I think. I don't know exactly where on the schedule it is, but
yeah,
Coastal has to.
It's Wednesday night. It's I think it's the 20th or whatever that is. It's a week from this Wednesday.
And Coastal's got to go to App for that. So that'll be a challenge. Other than that, I don't think I see anybody else in the Sun Belt knocking them off. Louisiana's a talented team under Billy Napier. They're 4-1, but they keep playing down to their competition. I don't know what to make of them this year. They're a good team, but if they're playing a not so good team, they kind of don't play their best. Maybe they're almost certainly going to win the West Division and play either App or Coastal in the Sun Belt Championship game. So there will be probably 2 tests left for Coastal. I mean, they have to beat App. If they beat App, there'll be a second one. But they have looked incredible. Grayson McCall, he is on pace to obliterate the record for QB rating this year. He's completing like 79% of his passes, 13 yards per completion, 1 interception, I think. They have been unbelievable this year, and we just kind of haven't talked about them as much, mostly because of Cincinnati.
Chris, when you look at Coastal, and this is something Kyle and I were actually talking a little bit about yesterday, if they're to continue this trajectory, and let's just say they, continue winning and they have another finish in the top 25, do you see at the end of the season a P5 scooping up Chadwell? And then the second part of that is, do you see that type of offense, that spread option, which it looks to me like they run it from the pistol? Do you see that type of offense catching on? And let's just take the Big Ten, for example.
It works if you have the right quarterback to do it. I mean, their first couple of years there when Chadwell got there were not good. They were like 5-7. And then going into last year, Grayson McCall was not even on the preseason magazines because Coastal was returning 2 quarterbacks who had started the previous year. But McCall played in this kind of offense in high school. And so once he kind of got back from dealing with COVID early in fall camp, and he got in there. I think it was his second year in the program. Things just kind of clicked for him, and they realized they had the right guy at quarterback here. So I think that offense can work anywhere. You got to have the right quarterback to do it. It's always the case when you have those types of offenses. As for Chadwell, yeah, he's going to get a bigger job pretty soon. Now, Big Ten, probably not, just because of kind of where things are. I don't know where, I don't know what job, but he will be picked up pretty quickly. Depends on exactly what opens. It's expected to be a pretty busy coaching carousel this year, and he will likely be near the top of a lot of lists for certain jobs, especially if they're in the South.
Like we mentioned, Chris, yesterday you were at the Cotton Bowl for Texas, Oklahoma. What are some of the other teams you've had the opportunity to see so far this year, and who do you have coming up that you're going to be able to check out here in the weeks to come?
I think I've only been to one other game. It was SMU at TCU a couple weeks back, the whole flag planting incident and everything that came with that. So 2 pretty high-scoring, fun Big 12 type games. But this coming week, I am going to Cincinnati for Cincinnati UCF. I've never been to Cincinnati, so I'm looking forward to checking out Nippert Stadium. I'm looking forward to seeing the Bearcats up close and just maybe how good this team is. So after that, I don't really know, but that's kind of what I have coming up next.
One other thing we failed to mention, big happening yesterday. You saw Boise State, and Boise State won in Provo, taking down the BYU Cougars. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, that was a heck of a response by Boise State. I mean, they come into this game 2-3, their worst start since 2001, and they're getting beat up on the line of scrimmage, and that they typically don't do that. But they punched BYU in the mouth. They forced 4 takeaways, only allowed 1 sack, held BYU in check on 3rd and 4th downs, and played like the Boise State of old. So we'll see if that continues moving forward in Mountain West play, because they're already kind of behind the 8 ball because they lost in Nevada. But that is the Boise State of old that we expected when Andy Avalos took over as head coach. So we'll see if things keep moving in the right direction. But that was a heck of a performance. I wrote last week about Boise State and the struggles that they were having, getting whipped on the line of scrimmage. But that was a different story up at BYU. That was impressive.
Now, since you covered the group of 5 for the Athletic, quick question for you: where do you think the conference realignment ends up for the American? Obviously things didn't work out with the Mountain West experiment. I didn't think it would. Where do you think they go from here? My guess is probably UAB, Florida Atlantic, Charlotte, and somebody else. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, UAB sounds like the one that has the most support from the league. But outside of that, there aren't a ton of obvious choices. You could do, like you said, the Charlottes, the Georgia States, maybe, if you want to go for markets. Or do you go for an App State in Louisiana, programs that have more success on the football field? Do you go big? Do you try to add a bunch of schools and maybe, as opposed to maybe a few? So they could go a few different ways here. There aren't any obvious solutions other than, grab UAB and see what else you can kind of put together.
Yeah, definitely not a big fan of just going simply markets. Yes, some of those programs have had some success, but nothing to the extent of an App State or Louisiana and programs like that you mentioned. And if you're going to go market, yes, UAB, I'm sure is the job Bill Clark's done there. That's probably the most established if you're going that route.
Yeah, I mean, they just opened up a new stadium. They pay their coach $1.5 million. That's the kind of investment you need to kind of stay with the American, because the American has by far the biggest budgets in the group of 5. They pay their coaches more than anybody else. Everybody's over $1 million. Outside of the American, there's not many of those. So UAB fits that. App State and Louisiana, they're smaller budget programs, much smaller budgets than the American. So it kind of comes down to what exactly is important. Do you want football success? Do you want potential TV markets? Do you want big budgets? Those are kind of the factors you have to weigh, and there's no clear answer, I don't think, on which way this should go.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Chris, certainly appreciate your time this afternoon. Before we let you go, tell folks how they can read your work on The Athletic and so forth.
Yep, just theathletic.com. We cover basically every pro and college sport. I'm at Chris Vannini on Twitter. If you click on any of the links to my stories, you can get 50% off a subscription to The Athletic. We got that sale going on right now. So if you don't already, please check us out.
We'll certainly do that, and look forward to having you back on later in the season.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Right now, we'll go from one Chris to another. I'm very excited to welcome in. This guy's joined us in the past from the SEC Network, former Florida Gators wide receiver from the Steve Spurrier era, and that is Chris Doering. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, guys. Good to be back on with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Some tremendous football being played in the SEC yesterday. Obviously, Bama going down. You had Kentucky remaining undefeated and really put a whipping on LSU. And then you have Tennessee. Obviously, Josh Hypel has that offense rolling, putting up over 100-plus points in the last 2 weeks. And then the game that played out in Oxford. So what were some of your major takeaways from Week 6?
It is funny. I think the whole theme of this season has just been what we think we know in 1 week leads to something that proves we absolutely have no idea what we know the next week. You know, I thought that there was a resurgence of defensive dominance in this conference this year, which there had been through the first month plus of the season. And then we see games where, like you mentioned, Ole Miss and Arkansas put up, 1,200 yards or more of offense together, score, over 100 points combined. You see what Tennessee's been doing lately to two different defenses within the SEC, and you look at just overall the Alabama defense doing things that we're not typically seeing from Alabama defenses. So it's been a weird year. I think the one consistency that we can kind of continue to lean on in this league has been Georgia. They're the most complete team in the country to me. They have the best defense that I've probably ever seen in all my years of watching college football. And their offense has a diversity that makes it very difficult to defend. And I want to credit Stetson Bennett. Most teams don't have the luxury of having a backup quarterback that can come in, that knows the offense as well as Stetson Bennett does, that brings a little bit of a change up from what JT Daniels brings, and is as confident and competent as Stetson Bennett is. So that, to me, Georgia is head and shoulders above everybody else in the college football landscape right now.
No doubt. Kudos to Stetson Bennett for hanging around and playing his role on that Georgia team. Let's start off with that Arkansas Ole Miss game. Just if you saw Lane Kiffin's post-game interview, you could tell he was just relieved to win the ball game, and he was pretty frustrated with how his defense played, and kind of just a big sigh and hotty-toddy as he walked off. Did you have a chance to see his post-game interview?
Yeah, I thought the post-game interview was awesome, wasn't it? I mean, it was a tale of two different commentaries. First and foremost, he's lauding praise on his quarterback, Matt Corral, who certainly deserved it, had a tremendous ball game, running the football, throwing the football as well, the leadership that he brings. And then on the other side of the coin, he couldn't lament enough how bad his defense was. He said it multiple different times, and even to the point where the game at the end was not necessarily won by his defense on the 2-point conversion attempt, but it was lost by Arkansas not executing there. So it's disappointing to me because I felt like this was the season where we were going to see Ole Miss's defense be better. I caught and bought into what I saw against Louisville and some of the overmatched opponents in the early portions of the pre-conference schedule with Tulane and the next week with the other team that they play. Who was it? Austin P, I guess it was. So those things maybe gave me a little bit of a skewed idea of what this defense was going to look like this year. But still some problems that showed themselves against Alabama last week, the inability to stop the run, the yards allowed after contact. Both of those things held true yesterday as well. So clearly some work to be done by DJ Durkin's side of the ball.
And although they've lost consecutive game now, what a tremendous job Sam Pittman's doing there in Fayetteville. Just making them relevant once again.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about, how low this program was just as recent as 2 years ago, and to see the confidence that he's been able to instill. And you're right, even though they lost the last two ball games, I think they're a much different team than they were when Sam Pittman took over, and that's a credit to him. That's a credit to the staff they hired. Some uncharacteristic mistakes from Barry Odom's side of the ball. You saw a couple times where receivers were running wide open behind the defenders in the secondary. So there's some things to clean up, but I like where the team is right now. I like KJ Jefferson, and his continued improvement this year has proven to be a real asset in the run game with his physicality. And we keep making comparisons to Cam Newton, which is high praise, but I do think there's some similarities in terms of body type and style of running ability. But yeah, I think Sam Pittman's done a tremendous job there, and excited to see that continued evolution of the program, because I think SEC football is better when Arkansas is competitive, and it's nice for the people in that state who I know are so passionate about Razorback football.
And you talk about Jefferson's development. Talk about Kendall Briles, the Arkansas offensive coordinator. It'll be interesting to see if he gets some looks as a head coach somewhere soon.
Yeah, I think two of those guys yesterday. I think Jeff Levy's another guy that's an assistant in that ball game, the offensive coordinator for Ole Miss, that'll be in contention for getting some potential traction in the upcoming season when some coaching vacancies are looking to be filled. So I'm very impressed with both what Kendall Briles and Jeff Levy have meant to their teams, and how both of those offenses are playing really well, particularly at the quarterback positions.
Chris, I'd like to ask you your thoughts on the Florida Gators. I'm married to a Florida Gator, so it's always a hot topic in my house. And, when you look at the Gators this year, they've had two brutal losses. The Alabama game essentially came down to a missed extra point early, which really could have been a win for Florida. And then the Kentucky game was another brutal loss where, a blocked kick really changed the momentum of that game. So I'm just curious your thoughts on the Gators, and really, what the mood is around the quarterback position and Emory Jones.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you make there. Two special teams plays have probably cost, or at least contributed to, in a large way, the two losses that Florida has this season. I would say this, though. I don't know that they've played their best ball game yet. I still see, even yesterday with the big win over Vanderbilt, I still see a lot of inconsistencies. I see self-inflicted errors. You go back to that Kentucky game, as you mentioned, in addition to the block kick, you have 15 penalties, 8 false starts. You give up over 115 yards in penalty yardage. Those are things that you can't go on the road in the SEC and do. A lot of people made a bunch out of, going toe-to-toe with Alabama a couple of weeks ago. But, I look at this Alabama team. I was very vocal leading up to the Ole Miss game that I thought that Alabama had a lot of holes. I said there was a big gap between where Alabama was in the 2020 national championship team and where this team is this year. So I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on that close loss to Alabama, almost as if that was a moral victory, which I being a Florida guy, we don't celebrate moral victories, at least, when I was there. So I think that the fan base is a little bit frustrated, as they should be, but they're also a little irrational. I've heard people say that Dan Mullen should be fired, that Todd Grantham, the defensive coordinator, should be fired. I think the defense has been much improved from where they were last year. And you're talking about offensively having to replace one of the best quarterbacks in the history of your program in Kyle Trask. You're changing what you're doing dynamically with much more of the quarterback run game involved than the way you use Trask. So there's an adjustment that's taking place there. But I think the offensive line has improved considerably from where they were. The ability to run the football, one of the best in the country at doing that, after being very average at best in the previous 3 seasons of Dan Mullen's tenure in Gainesville. So I'm seeing some improvement. I just think that they've got to figure out the quarterback situation. Emory Jones still has to become more consistent. I wonder about the dynamics, guys. Like, Emory Jones seems to play better when he doesn't have to look over his shoulder. When Anthony Richardson was injured and was unavailable, it seemed like that Emory played with a lot more confidence. And right now, I just don't necessarily know the plan for how they're utilizing Anthony Richardson. Yesterday against Vanderbilt would have been a great day to get him some extended reps in the second half of that game. But was the intention more to try to get him reps, or was it to continue to try to build confidence for Emory Jones? Statistically, the day that Emory Jones put up one of the better of the season, but he was still inaccurate at times, had a bad throw on a tip ball that got intercepted. So they've got to find a way to smooth out the inconsistencies and the self-inflicted errors that are costing them offensively right now.
Are the Gator fans sort of clamoring for Richardson right now? Is that, do you get the sense that is a controversy, or do you see it right now as Emory is the clear front runner and Richardson's going to have to wait his turn?
Look, I was very vocal in the offseason, dating back to the spring, on my belief that it was not a foregone conclusion that Emory was just going to take over the job, that he was going to be pushed by Anthony Richardson. And I think in the games you've seen him play this year, it has been the allure of his explosiveness, what he can do in the run game that makes you wonder what he can do when he really gets the confidence that he needs to feel like he can run the entirety of the offense. But Dan Mullen has said multiple times, hey, some of these plays that the fans are excited about are actually plays where Anthony Richardson gets to the line, doesn't check to the right play, doesn't correct the protection, misses his first read, misses the second read, scrambles around and makes a play, and everybody thinks it's the greatest effort in the world. So you guys know this. I mean, as a quarterback, you have to have the trust of your coach, your play caller, of the rest of your teammates to be able to run the offense the way it's supposed to be run, protect the football, which he made a terrible throw yesterday on a throwback screen that really was well defended by Vanderbilt, and to be able to get your offense in the best position to be successful by seeing what the defense is doing and checking to the right plays. He's not there yet. That's not any indictment of him. He's a young player that hasn't had a lot of snaps in this league yet. He'll get there. And I think that Dan Mullen's doing the right thing by bringing him along very slowly.
Great point.
A guy you're very familiar with, Chris, is obviously Shane Matthews, loyal listener of Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning. And Shane, he was on the Texas A&M train several months ago, back during the summer. And with the start to the season, I'm sure he like most others, had thought Bama was going to probably steamroll the Aggies. But then, they were 17.5, 18.5 point favorites going into College Station, and then Jimbo Fisher and company find a way to get it done. First of all, what were your takes on that game? And I think the biggest thing for me, I would have never have thought that with the way Texas A&M had played offensively, that they would put up that kind of offense against Alabama.
Yeah, it's a great point because, again, I was very vocal after the Florida game about Alabama's issues in their front seven, in the run defense, and their inability to play their gaps and their discipline on that side of the ball. Secondary that to me, is not the greatest that we've seen from Alabama in the past. Some young receivers that are trying to fill the void of production from some of the best to ever do it in Alabama football history, and Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. And I thought those things were going to hurt them against Ole Miss, and maybe they would have had Ole Miss been able to convert on that first fourth down, or on that third fourth down on the first drive where they turned the ball over and the game seemed to change there. But A&M took advantage of those things that I was concerned about with Alabama. I took a lot of heat from Alabama fans, but I think even the most diehard Alabama fan at this point in time would have to admit that this is a team that is very young, that's trying to figure things out, that lacks leadership, that lacks discipline. And, it's a shell of the 2020 national championship team, which was one of the greatest in the history of college football. That's not a negative about this team. When you lose as much production and as much leadership as you did from last year's team, you're going to take a step back. Now, with that being said, I never, like you, would have guessed it would have been A&M's offense that would have been able to take advantage of the things that we looked at on tape and had some suspicions about. A&M had given us no reason to believe that they could run the ball. Their offensive line had played really poorly up until that point in the season. I hadn't seen a whole lot of production in the passing game, either because of the receivers' inability to separate or because of Zach Calzada's inaccuracies. But I thought the game plan was really good on both sides of the ball yesterday. You look at what they did with Calzada early. They had him moving around. He just wasn't standing in the pocket. They got him outside of the pocket. He made some throws where he was not under duress, got some confidence. I think he hit his first 10 passes from the start. So you could tell his confidence was growing with every completion and every play that he made. You saw the offensive line block better. They had more success in the run game than we had seen all year long. And this was an offense that struggled to run the football against Colorado a couple of weeks ago. Like the far cry from that performance versus what we saw against A&M Saturday is a huge difference. So I was shocked that A&M was able to put it all together, but at the same time, probably shouldn't have been. The game plan from Mike Elko's side of the ball was amazing. They got pressure on Bryce Young all night long. It seemed like he was running for his life and having to make throws under duress all night. Receivers dropping balls, again, some of those things that I was concerned about. But yeah, I never would have imagined that it was going to be A&M that was going to take advantage of it. And I think maybe some of the invincibility has been knocked off a little bit of this Alabama's team. So I'm interested to see, if they can regain their confidence and fix some of the mistakes that they made on Saturday night, and see how the approach of opposing defenses and opposing teams in general are against this Alabama team going the rest of the way, because they don't really have any margin for error any longer.
Yeah, I'll tell you that crowd was electric last night, the 12th man down in Texas. And Chris, I wanted to ask you right now, what would be your top 5 in the country? As of today, yesterday was a crazy day. We saw a lot of wild finishes. You look at that Penn State-Iowa game where Penn State was seemingly in control. The quarterback Clifford goes down early in the game, and Iowa goes on to win that ball game, and I believe is now sitting at number 3 in the country. Right now, what would be the Chris Doering top 5 in the country?
Yeah, I haven't put much thought into that yet. Obviously, Georgia, as we've talked about, is the clear-cut number 1, in my opinion, head and shoulders above everybody else. I guess de facto-wise, you have to put Iowa up there. I mean, I wasn't all that impressed with Iowa's performance yesterday either, although they did show a lot of resiliency in coming from behind and putting together a nice second-half performance. Golly, then after that, I don't even know. Ohio State seems to be putting things together. They're playing with a much better rhythm offensively than what we had seen early in the season. I'm still a believer in I don't know that I would put Ole Miss up that high, but I'm still, from our conference at least, I'm still a believer in Ole Miss. And at some point in time, everybody's got to start taking Kentucky seriously. I mean, this is the week where, they could end up losing the game. But let's talk about, the SEC's chances in the college football playoff. I still think they have a really good chance to get 2 teams in. And, how seriously will the committee take Kentucky if they go to Athens next week and lose that game and then win the rest of the way out? You're talking about an 11-1 Kentucky team that has a pretty impressive resume. And I'm not saying they're necessarily going to be able to do that or not, but I wonder how much the reputation of Kentucky of years past, at least outside the Southeast, negatively impacts how seriously people take them. But I think you're talking about, potentially an Ole Miss team, if they could run the table. Every game that they have on their schedule is winnable. So Ole Miss or Kentucky could be serious contenders for the college football playoffs this year with one loss, and each of which potentially could not even play in their conference championship game.
Sure is wide open, and you could see a lot of different scenarios where these teams take a jump forward.
Yeah, those were the 2 teams that I was most excited about heading into the season. I think each of them had a 7-win expectation level from the folks in Vegas, and I think both of them far exceed what that total was set at in the preseason.
And very quickly, before we move on to some other topics and in different conferences, you talk about Kentucky. What a job Coach Stoops has done there. His first 3 seasons, they were just 4-20, but to their credit, they were patient. They understood the magnitude of what he was trying to accomplish, and it's paying off now.
Yeah, I've been a leader of the bandwagon for Coach Stoops in that program for about 5 years now. I had a chance to go call one of their spring games probably 4 or 5 years ago, and just saw the upgrade in talent and the depth of talent that he's been able to recruit there, and the development. I don't know if there's a better coaching staff at developing talent than what Coach Stoops and the rest of those assistants in Lexington are. They do a tremendous job. Even looking back to Josh Allen, a guy a couple years ago that was lightly recruited, that turned into being one of the best players in the history of that school, a first-round draft pick. So I look at what they've done, probably with less access to the best talent, and it's pretty amazing. Now they're starting to get guys, Josh Pascal. If you haven't watched Josh Pascal, you're missing one of the better defensive players in the entire country. That defense in general, Chalkwest Jones, a former Ole Miss player, You look at Jordan Wright, DeAndre Square. They've got some serious names that are top talented defenders in this conference and in this country as well. So I think people need to really pay attention and give credit to what Coach Stoops has done there. And more importantly, give credit to Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director of Kentucky, for having patience to let the vision that Coach Stoops and his staff had kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's a great point. And, I think, it's obvious that Kentucky was very committed to Coach Stoops and Coach Stoops was committed to being with Kentucky. And I think the ability to give him that time and have that patience, which, let's face it, you don't see that oftentimes around the country. It's always about who's the next hot coach coming up, right? And, don't you just get the sense that by being patient and giving Stoops the time to get his recruits in and establish his program, that now they're really seeing the dividends?
No doubt. Yeah, it's kind of the contrarian point of view from what we see in college football these days, where you hire a guy, they're supposed to have success in 2 or 3 years. In some cases, I mean, we're talking about potentially running Coach O out 2 years after winning a national championship. We saw it with my good friend Gene Chiswick, at Auburn after his 2010 national championship and being fired 2 years later. Like, it's crazy the expectation level that fans, that athletic departments have for coaches, particularly in this conference. But that's part of the deal, right? If you're going to be paid the type of money that these guys are paid in the league to be head coaches of these programs, you're going to be expected to win. But I think it shows what can happen if you trust that you hired the right guy and you give him time to kind of execute. And more importantly, if you surround him with the tools he needs to be successful. Anybody that hasn't been to Lexington lately doesn't know what they're missing in terms of facility upgrades. They have one of the best practice facilities in the entire country. You look at what they've done to Commonwealth Stadium to upgrade that and make it more fan-friendly. Their fans, too. I mean, their fans may be one of the most underrated football fans in the entire country as well. They're passionate. It was always one of my favorite places to go, even though, they weren't necessarily a winning program. Now they have something to really be proud about. And they showed up and showed out the last 2 Saturday nights, and we're a big reason why that Kentucky is 6-0 now.
One more note on the SEC East before we move on to other leagues, and that's with Tennessee. Josh Hypel and the Vols have gotten his tenure off to a solid start. They've really put up a lot of points the last couple weekends. And, there were some around the nation that kind of questioned that hire. And, some UCF folks, they acted like they weren't very sad to lose him. But what are your thoughts on Tennessee under Josh Hypel?
Yeah, I got to admit, I was a little surprised at the success that he's been able to have so quickly. I was one of those that was kind of skeptical of the hire and thought that, maybe it was something in Danny White, the new athletic director at Tennessee, who was with him at UCF, brought him because of a familiarity. But it seems like it's been a great fit. And that's kind of the theme as we look around the SEC. 8 new coaches in their first or second year in this conference. And I look at it, we talk about Sam Pittman, seems to be a great fit in Fayetteville. I think Shane Beamer is going to be a great fit in Columbia, South Carolina. And I think that Hypel's kind of the same way. The fact that they've been able to get the kind of success offensively that they've been able to have so quickly is pretty amazing. And we don't talk enough about the defense. The defense was a real question mark heading into the season with all the departures and how poor they looked in the spring and their front seven, particularly. They fly around. They play fast. Yesterday, I think, 4 sacks, 4 true turnovers. So I really like what they've done on that side of the ball. And I think Tennessee's way ahead of what I expected them to be at this point.
This year with Clemson struggles and the ACC is really a cluster. Who do you see winning that conference?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't follow, my job with the SEC Network is primarily looking at these 14 teams. So I'm probably not the best to really prognosticate about some of those other conferences. Obviously, I'm a big fan of college football in general, but our Saturdays are pretty filled with SEC play that we're covering. So I think the storyline that I'm hoping for is Wake Forest to continue to make the run that they are. Clemson's step back inevitably was going to take a step back at some point in time, but I think how far they've taken the step back, the lack of explosiveness that they have on offense is really surprising to me. And just the depth that conference in general has fallen to is a bit surprising. I mean, they've got to find a way to get Florida State back. They've got to find a way to get Miami back. I think if you're talking about a conference that has a very good Clemson, Florida State, and Miami program, it's a much different visual than it is right now, where we're pointing to maybe the best team in the league being Wake Forest.
Kind of shifting gears in onto a couple of SEC related topics. You obviously play for Coach Spurrier at Florida, and his new restaurants open there, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill and Visor's Rooftop Bar. So, do you have a story or two about the HBC that you can share with us?
Man, I have nothing but great things to say about Coach Spurrier. Not only did he give me a chance as a walk-on to earn a scholarship, to earn playing time, to get an opportunity to lead the University of Florida, having caught more touchdowns than anybody in the history of the conference at that point. He just has meant so much to me as a player and in my personal development. Obviously, revitalized my NFL career. I tore my Achilles in the 2000 season playing for the Denver Broncos. Was out of the league in 2001. He took me with him to Washington in 2002, and I ended up having some of my most successful seasons in the league after that. So I just owe so much to him. He's a very unique guy. I loved just being around him, and it was tough, man. I got drafted by Jacksonville, so I went from Coach Spurrier, who was probably one of the more loose, fun coaches to play for, to going right to Jacksonville with Tom Coughlin, who was the head coach at that point in time. So it was quite the contradiction from one another. But I see Coach a lot, and he's still in Gainesville working in that ambassador role. And the restaurant's really good, man. I've been there multiple times, and it is jam-packed every night. So it's hopefully it'll continue to do well.
Chris, I need to appease the Florida Gator fans in my house, so I'm going to ask you a question here. When you think back to your career, you played in so many good big games during that era. I mean, it just seemed like Florida was always in the mix during that time for a national championship. Is there one game that really stands out to you when you think about your career? What would you say was maybe the biggest win you had at Florida?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like my career was bookended with maybe the two most important games in my career, and maybe in the history of the program. Like our win, most people know me for the catch against Kentucky, where we were losing and found a way to win with a touchdown that I caught with 3 seconds left in the game. That was 1993. That was one of those games where we threw 7 interceptions, and at that point in time, we were known kind of as a program. They called us roadkill because when we went on the road away from home, we didn't fare very well. Coach Spurrier points to that game as maybe the one that turned the narrative a little bit, and we went on a run to go to 5 straight SEC championship games. Won the next one, 93, 94, 95, 96, the next 4 there. So that was the game that I think changed the trajectory of the program and of my life. It was the game that caught my first career touchdown reception early in the game, and then caught that game winner, which was my second, but the one that most people remember. And then my last game as a Gator at home against Florida State, we were undefeated. Hadn't had a whole lot of success against the Seminoles, and had a chance to potentially go to the championship game that year in the Fiesta Bowl. We were able to win in my last home game in the Swamp, senior night. I broke the SEC career touchdown reception record that game, and we're still the only team in the history of Florida football to go undefeated in the regular season and win the SEC championship game. All 3 of the national championship teams at Florida, somewhere along the way, lost a regular season game. So I'm very proud of what we accomplished that 95 season. Unfortunately, we played one of the best teams in the history of college football in Nebraska, but it was those 2 games probably stand out to me as the most memorable of my career.
Boy, oh boy, that Nebraska team was loaded. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
And just to follow up to that, Chris, who was the best DB you ever played against?
Oh, man. I mean, in college, one of the ones that probably gave me the most difficult time was Torrey James, played at LSU. I ended up playing with him in Denver. He was a 6'4" guy, long, one of those guys. There wasn't a ton of guys that were playing press coverage at that point, but LSU was very aggressive with us and disrupted the timing. I think you saw more of that as the rest of that season went on. Our offense was passing game was so predicated on timing, and when you're able to press guys, it throws that timing off a little bit. So Torrey was one of the guys that was probably the most difficult that I had to play against during my time in the SEC. All right, now I'll tell you this in the NFL. I played for the Redskins with Coach Spurrier, as I talked about in 2002. Every day in practice, I went up against Champ Bailey, Darryl Green, and Fred Smoot. So it was a trifecta of three of the best corners in the history of football. And so that made Sundays a lot easier, that's for sure.
Oh, I'm sure that made you a better player going up against those guys every day.
No doubt.
Well, Chris, we certainly appreciate your time this afternoon here on a Sunday, carving out some for us. But before we let you go, tell folks how they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, great to be with you. I don't know if I want people following me on social media after all the heat I took from Bama fans last couple of weeks, but I'm on Twitter at Chris Doering and on Instagram at cdoering28.
Again, really appreciate your time. Enjoy your coverage of the SEC, and look forward to hearing you describe things throughout the remainder of the season.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate you, and look forward to being back again soon.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
There you have Chris Doering of the SEC Network. Always great talking football with him, and so many great memories like you were referencing there, Matt, of the fun and gun offense back in the 90s under Coach Spurrier, I guess, from 1990 to 2001.
Absolutely. I mean, you think back to that time frame, and it's just like I said, every year Florida was in the mix for the SEC championship and the national championship, and it was a unique time in the history of that university and that program. And I can specifically remember Doering making some huge plays. He was a clutch receiver, to say the least. So it was nice having a chance to speak with him today.
Yeah, no doubt. And before we wrap this show up and get out of here, let's go ahead and plug our sponsors. Really appreciative of Tim Neal and the folks at Surveillance and Security Solutions. Call Tim Neal at 716-490-4503. Again, 716-490-4503 for all your security needs. Tim will take care of you. In addition to Tim Neal, I'm very appreciative of Kevin Walker. Kevin Walker and L&K Custom Homes. Kevin's a licensed general contractor in the Greensboro area of North Carolina. So if you're in the market for a new home, looking at building, definitely give Kevin a call, 336-688-8461. And then also a former Pirate defensive lineman, Josh Smith, from the Skip Holtz era. And also played for Ruff and McNeil in 2010. But Josh does an excellent job with ENC Restoration. You can visit them, encrestoration.biz, or by calling 252-241-0812. And that is for commercial and residential needs such as exterior cleaning, pressure washing, deck, fence, and concrete restoration. But some of our upcoming content,
and also if you hire Josh, and you want to talk football, he's a very mild mannered, timid guy, a little meek, won't give you his opinion on anything. So just be kind with him, be gentle.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories or funniest things that I recall about Josh's time in East Carolina was actually senior day against SMU. That was back, we had a video board, but it wasn't as large as it is now. But Josh that day actually it was, because it was 2010 on the first year of the new video board. So, but anyway, Josh came out for senior day to meet his parents at midfield, and he had probably as big a dip as I've ever seen a human have in his lip.
That was DIP dip.
Yes, dip.
Okay.
Yes, DIP. Sorry, maybe I didn't enunciate. And,
yeah.
DIP. Don't want to lose any sponsors there or any teeth. But yeah, really appreciative of Josh and his support of the show. Again, ENC Restoration. Guys, do you have anything before I promote some of our upcoming content?
No, it's got a good time for an off week for East Carolina. I think you can work on some of the execution errors and some of the coaching errors. I think there's a lot to be looked at on the game film from yesterday. So I think it's a good time for an off week here at the midpoint of the season as we go into the second half of the season and the Houston Cougars.
No doubt. An open week like that's always a great time to do a little introspection and take a look at yourself and self scout, so to speak. But some of our content.
I got a question. Sorry, Bob. I got a question for both of you guys. With us having a short week after Houston against South Florida, playing them on a Thursday night, along with working on yourself, would you work on South Florida a little bit this week? Kind of implement that game plan a little, and then go into Houston next week, and then just come back to it to kind of give yourself an advantage with a short week after Houston?
There may be some brief exposure to USF. If you're playing Navy, when we obviously have Navy coming up, there may be some exposure to the triple option. You see that this week. Matt, you obviously experienced it firsthand on the defensive side of the ball. So, what are your memories of that under Coach Logan?
I wouldn't be surprised if they did some film work on South Florida this week, and sort of looked at both teams a little bit. Maybe you take, a film session or two and take a peek at South Florida. I think that would make sense in the open week while you have some extra time to prepare. Like you said, it is going to be a short week. So it would certainly make sense to me. I think, I could see the coaches. I know they'll be doing that behind the scenes. Now, will they share it with the players? I think coaches tend to be a little hesitant to do that because they always want to have the mindset one game at a time. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, Kyle.
Getting back to some of the content we've put out in recent days and some of the things we have headed your way. This is obviously the 30th anniversary of that 1991 Peach Bowl team. So we have our series of Peach of a Season. We've caught up with Jeff Connors as well as a former Pirate linebacker, starting backer on that team, Ken Burnett, to reflect on that 91 season where the Pirates finished ranked 9th in the country. We'll also have our new segment that will be taking place from now all the way up through the conclusion of basketball season, and that is the TSO locker room. We'll be joined weekly by Tristan Newton, Pirate point guard, and also Vance Jackson, newcomer who really had done some nice things previously at UConn, New Mexico, and also at Arkansas a season ago. So we'll have that for you later on tonight. And then on Tuesday, we'll visit with former Pirate tight end Jay Sonhalter, as well as one of his colleagues with the she does some work in the Raleigh Triangle area, especially covering the ACC, and that is Marilyn Payne.
All right.
If you guys don't have anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap the show up. For former East Carolina linebacker Matt Semenza and Kyle Barber, I'm Bubba Rosenbaum, and you have been listening to the College Football Playback on the Sports Objective. Have a great weekend, everyone.